everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Renee and I read a lot. And today I'm going over all the books that I read in the past week, which is definitely a number of books. 1 second, please. Which is 7 books, which is an average of 1 a day, but for whatever reason, it doesn't feel like I read that many last week. Probably because there's one book that I was reading for like almost a week and a half, which is a normal amount of time to read a book. Except I am a crazy person, so I read it in a week and a half and I was like, wow, this is taking me forever. So for me, it feels like I didn't read very much, but it's still 7 books. So actually that's pretty good, I would say. Yeah, without further ado, I'll get into it. So the first 4 books that I read are all part of one book series by Willow Winters. I am desperately trying to make it through her books. I bought her whole Discreet series at the beginning of, I'm gonna say 2021. And it's like 50 something books. They're short, they're easy. I can normally read them in about a day, 2 days at most. They're taking me forever. I still haven't, I'm almost at the end. I think I have like maybe 6 more of her books on my bookshelf, but I'm like determined to finish them by the end of this year. So I read the first 4 books are part of that series, but they're also part of their own series. The way that she kind of writes her books, it kind of dropped off in the middle, but at the beginning, she wrote a bunch of books that were kind of like in the same series because they took place with the same like crime family. And then it kind of stayed with that family. And then it went on to like kind of a different group of people. And then she kind of did her own thing for a while. And now we're back in like the same unit of people. Most people call those families, but it's friends and family, I would say. So I'm going to go with a village of people, the same village. And this has been going on for maybe the past like 15 books. So this is like its own series because each one of like the smaller series focuses on like one couple, right? And that's like the names that are written on the books. I'll insert a picture of my bookshelf here so you can see what I'm talking about. This was the This Love Hurts series. So this one focuses on Delilah, who is a lawyer, she's got her own kind of like past demon she's grappling with. It focuses on Cody Walsh, who's an ex-FBI agent turned cop, and Marcus, who is this serial killer that has been used as the bad guy in every single one of the other books that take place in this like larger series, this merciless world, I think is like what the overall series is called. And so you finally get some like backstory on Marcus. Marcus, the serial killer, is interested in cop Delilah, but so is Cody, the cop. So there's like a love triangle going on, which I'm gonna be dead honest, I'm never a fan of love triangles. They never wrap up well for me. Like I always feel bad for one member of the love triangle. There are maybe a few cases where it is done well, but unless we're ending up in some sort of polyamory situation, a love triangle to me just makes me feel sad. I guess it's like easy because it makes you feel emotional, right? So like it's easy to write emotional into that because the emotion comes like from a really obvious place, but it's still like, it's not my favorite thing. But anyway, it's 3 books and then like a prequel. And the prequel is just what I didn't know. The prequel is the first half of the first book. So I read the prequel and then I started the first book and I was like, this is really familiar. Okay, so she used a few of the same passages. No, it goes on. It's like the first half of the book. It's like 100 pages. The book itself is 200. The prequel is the first 100. I was like, okay, well, that was a waste of my time. But whatever, we're here now. So it does start with Do You Want Me? And I rated this one 3.5 stars. I thought it was intriguing. It's very light on the romance. That's what I'm gonna say for this whole series. While it's a little bit intriguing, and I'm glad we're finally getting to see something of Marcus, because I've mentioned before how I think Marcus is kind of like this easily put in like lazy writing boogeyman who they can just like blame everything on when she doesn't want to like figure out an actual wrap up to the story. Like, oh, it must be Marcus, the serial killer who nobody knows who he is and we've never seen, and he just lurks in the background, so he makes like some really easy tension. At least now we're getting some backstory on him. Like 15 books into this thing, which is a little excessive if you ask me, but whatever, I'm not here for that. This also takes place, what is it called? Chronologically, before the other books in the Merciless world. But you probably shouldn't read it chronologically. You should probably read it from based on when she put them out, because if you were planning on reading that, I don't think I would recommend it, to be completely honest. It's not my favorite of her works. Anyway, I'm getting so sidetracked. So the first book just details Delilah and Walsh getting together. Meanwhile, Marcus is kind of like looking at them on the sidelines like, interesting. I like her too. Fine, whatever. That's how the whole first book is. This Love Hurts. This Love Hurts, #1, if you will. Delilah and Walsh start getting chummy. Marcus starts sending her messages, and she's on the run. She like prosecuted these people for murder or something. I don't know. I couldn't really figure this out. I couldn't follow this at all. She prosecuted these people for murder, and now they want to kill her or something. I don't really understand. So she's on the run from like getting messages from Marcus and from these bad guys that she put away. I gave it 3.5 stars. Honestly, it's probably more like 3. It was really light on the romance. There wasn't a lot of like intrigue, and it was really confusing for me to follow. Then we move into But I Need You, This Love Hurts #2. We get a lot more on Marcus's backstory, which is great. Finally we're getting something out of him. And we're developing this love triangle even further. The triangle is Pythagorean. It's triangling. It's ding, 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 ding. Which I love. Don't get me wrong. Actually, no, I don't love. Which I don't love. Don't get me wrong. But whatever. Here we are. I gave it 4 stars. I think that was probably like really generous of a 4 stars. I said it was kind of predictable. It's interesting, but it's predictable. And it's very Marcus heavy, and there's not a lot of romance. But I think I gave it the 4 stars because I was finally getting backstory on this Marcus character that we've been meeting for books and books and books without actually knowing anything about him. So 4 stars. Then we move into And I Love You the Most. This Love Hurts #3. I gave this one 2 stars. This really, really was a unsatisfying conclusion to a series. Delilah is kidnapped, and Marcus and Walsh have to rescue her. I did not like, I mean, it's a love triangle, right? So like, I don't like how this wraps up, right? Like, one of the men obviously does not end up with the woman because it's a binary relationship. I don't know what you would call that. It's a relationship between 2 people is how it ends up. And so I don't love how one of them gets left out. And there's no good reason for it. There's no build up to what happens because there's no tension because there's been no real romance in the first 2 books. So I'm like, how am I supposed to buy into what happens with this love triangle in the last book that you're expecting me to believe that she just like loves one of them so much? But I don't believe it because there's been no romance or tension building up. It's been all about this serial killer backstory. Fine, but it's marketed as like a dark romance, but I didn't get that vibe at all. And that's what I wrote. It was hardly barely a romance, more a serial killer backstory. And I stand by that. Plus, in all the next books, spoiler alert, I guess, but in all the next books, because it's not really a spoiler alert because all the other ones you read before this. Anyway, in the next books, Cody is a cop. And allegedly, in this book, he resigns. So how does he resign from being a cop here, and then chronologically, 2 years later, in the same town, he is back to being a cop? It just did not make any sense. But it's like she didn't care that Cody is a cop in all of the other books. She just had him resign because that's what fit in well with this story. But they stay in the same town. They're in the same town in this book. So it's not like he went to another town to be a cop. It doesn't make any sense. I didn't like it. The end was stupid. The romance wasn't there. The love triangle wrapped up really poorly. And there's tons of plot holes now for all of the other books. So 2 stars, because at least it was like interesting to turn the pages. So you get 1 star for that, I guess. 2 stars is it's a generous 2 stars. So overall, would I recommend this series? No. I had so many problems with it. I do not like love triangles. I do not like the plot holes it left. I do not like how confusing it was for me to follow. And there was like no romance, which I did not sign up. I mean, I guess it's kind of fitting, like serial killers in October. That's like a thing, but it just wasn't for me. Not for me. If you like it, I am so happy for you. I did not. The next book I read, number 211, was Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I'll look it up and I'll insert how to pronounce it. I gave this one 4 stars. This is the first of like a 9-book series. It's eventually going to be 10 books, but she hasn't written the last. It's like obviously very famous. They've written or made a TV show based off of it. I don't know how closely the TV show follows it. I haven't watched a TV show because I'm still deciding if I'm going to read more of the books. It is 628 pages. This book took me 8 days to read, which is the longest that a book has taken me to read all year. And it's not even like it's that long. 628 pages is not absurdly longer than any other book that I've read this year, but it's just, in order to get into why I think it took me so long to read, I'm gonna need to get into my thoughts on it, but first I'll give you backstory on the book. So there's a woman, Claire Beecham, but it's Beauchamp. she exists in post-World War II England, and she and her husband, Frank, are in Scotland on holiday to try and like get back to themselves and their marriage after the war, right? And her husband's really interested in history, and they go to like this stone formation, and she, after like a ceremony of druids in Scotland, she goes and she touches a rock and this rock transports her back 200 years into the past. So now she is in mid 1700s Scotland, and she is found by a group of Scottish men, and she has to integrate into their society because now she is, you know, a 20th century woman, but now she's in 18th century Scotland. It's a bit of, I wouldn't call it fantasy, but a bit of like historical fiction, and there's a romance element to it too. And that's where I feel like my first criticism comes in, right? Because it is overall a romance. And I hear what you're thinking. Oh, a romance between you know, kind of estranged husband and wife after the war. No, that's not what I mean at all. I mean, she goes back and gets into another situationship with a Scottish man from the 18th century. I don't like cheating. I've mentioned this a million times. I don't like reading books about cheating. I don't like when the cheating develops into society. I don't like cheating in any context, in any sense of the word. I, for the life of me, could not figure out if this counted as cheating, because to be fair, she went back 200 years, so her husband isn't born yet. But also, to be fair, are you still married if you go back in time? Because it's until death does this part, right? Not until you haven't been born yet. But I guess that's not really a situation that like the church has had to really think about and assign rules to, right? But I'm sure like a priest would have some thought on that, right? Like, and a priest does explore that later in the book, which is interesting. And it's kind of like the author wanted to preemptively get away from these questions. But I can't decide. I can't decide if I think that's cheating. It's not great regardless, right? Because this is one of my other criticisms, is the main character, Claire, is very unemotional. Like, she does not seem super concerned with trying to get back to the 20th century and her husband, which is what makes it feel to me like cheating, because it's not like she's not constantly thinking of or trying to escape her circumstances and get back to the magical rock that will take her back forward in time. She's like pretty unconcerned about most things that happen to her. And I don't know if it's the author trying to do like a really show, don't tell, but it made me feel like a little gaslit. And this is where my big criticism comes in and why I think it took me so long to read. So Claire herself is really stoic in her narration of this book, right? In her narration of her experiences, she is extremely unemotional and unconcerned. So whenever we got like a big reveal of something, like whenever we heard somebody say something like that changed a lot of dynamics, like the ooh of the plots, you know, like those kinds of bam moments, Claire she wouldn't react, right? The sentence would be said, like somebody would say something that made me go, what? And Claire would have no opinion. It would not come up for maybe like 50 pages again. And it made me feel like a little bit gaslit, because I'm like, did we know this already? Like, did I miss this? And so I kept having to go back and like use the X-ray feature on my Kindle, and kept having to go back and forth to figure out, like, did I already know this? Like, was this a reveal? Because if this is a reveal, why does nobody else care? So I must have already known this, right? Because nobody seems to care that this big grand piece of the plot just like was dropped in a sentence and forgot about. But no, that was how the author kept choosing to reveal things. And Claire just had no emotional reaction to any of these really big, important things that were happening that, like, bless you. Sorry, my husband is here. Bless you. She had no reaction to anything around her that was happening. And so I kept having like these reactions, but then not really being able to explore the emotions and feelings that like Claire would have surrounding them, because Claire didn't explore or feel them. Or at least if she did it off page for every single reaction. She never had a reaction on page that I like knew about. She like literally just dropped things and then just kind of like walked away. Like her brain was just like, oh, that's interesting. Doesn't matter to me. Absolutely crazy, right? And like one of the things that really bothered me about this, because okay, I can deal with it. I get it. Maybe Claire just processes in her own time and the reader's left to process in the reader's own time. Sure, fantastic. However, one thing, there's like a really big, I don't know how to do this without like a bunch of spoilers, but I'm gonna try. So the author seems to have some weird thing around like abuse. We talk a lot. Like probably at least 50 pages are dedicated to the morals and the benefits and not benefits of spanking your children and your wife, which is just, okay, I get that it's a different time and it happened in the 1700s in Scotland, but there's like a lot of historical fiction and a lot of like realistic historical fiction, whatever, that manages to be written and get through everything without talking at all about hitting your children or your wife. So I have to wonder why we spent so much time on it. Like, it just kind of blows my mind a bit how much it was talked about and justified, and showing like the justified hittings versus the unjustified hittings. And it just seems so unnecessary, like completely 100% unnecessary. And something happens to Claire where she is on the brunt end of receiving this, and she has no emotions really regarding it. Like, she just kind of drops it really fast, which I cannot imagine a 20th century woman being abused and then just dropping it in 1 second. Like, what is going on? Why does she have no emotion? She was dropped 200 years in the past. She's nearly R-worded. She's being abused. And she's just like, what fun. I don't know. It's so strange. And she doesn't have like nearly enough culture shock, I don't think. Like, the language would have been pretty different. A lot of stuff would have been really different. And she just kind of glosses over it all. And she's like, no, I'm good. I'm like, what? I would be like, what the hell are we doing here, folks? And they don't seem concerned with that part at all. So, I mean, I guess good for her on that front. And then she also spends, there's enough plot holes in this book too that just really made me scratch my head. So you may be thinking, how did I give this book 4 stars? I've just spent like 5 minutes going over all my problems with it. I still thought it was really good. I still thought it was really interesting. I still thought it was, I mean, I'm not an expert on Scottish lore and culture by any stretch of the imagination, but to me, in my layperson's brain, it seemed really well researched, and like she had put a lot of effort into it, and I did really like it, and I am still considering reading the other books. It just took up so much of my like reading time and mental thought and processes that I had to give it a break before I got into anything else in the same vein or genre. But I think it's one of those things that you could read like one every few months and kind of keep up with. But overall, like, I liked it, and I want to watch the TV show and see what they do with that. But I think I liked it enough, a lot, maybe. I don't know. I have so many mixed thoughts on it. If you've read it, please let me know what you think, because I need somebody to bounce my thoughts off and see where I'm coming from. Number 212 was The Housemaid, and this is number 1 in the Housemaid series, but it's definitely like a book that is a standalone book that you could read into a series if you wanted, by Freida McFadden. I gave this one 4 stars. It could be between 3 and 4 stars, I think. I gave it 4 stars because it was very entertaining. The premise of the book is that there is a girl, Millie, who desperately needs a job because she's just gotten out of prison. And so she takes kind of like a sketchy job from this rich woman, Nina Winchester, and she's her live-in maid. But stuff starts happening. Nina seems to be pretty demanding and mean and maybe a touch psychotic. And her husband, Andy, seems so nice. And let's just say there's a little bit more going on behind the scenes in this crazy home. It was entertaining overall. It was very entertaining. I read it really quickly. I really enjoyed reading it. It is, though, exactly the same book almost as The Last Mrs. Parrish. And if The Last Mrs. Parrish did come out first, I did double check this, that it did come out with enough time for this author to have at least been inspired by it, but like really heavily inspired, like kind of copied. It actually was almost the exact same book. I felt like I was reading the exact same book. When I was like, this is extreme deja vu. So if you've read The Last Mrs. Parrish, there's no surprises, no twists, no turns, no nothing that's gonna get you in The Housemaid. The way that all of the reviews are like, the twists, the turns, but there's none. It's The Last Mrs. Parrish. We've read this already. And I'm sick and tired. This is the second book that this has happened to in as many weeks. There is a character who is Italian from Sicily and who only speaks Italian after living in the States for 3 years, which is like, okay, sure. But the Italian that he speaks is wrong. It's not correct. And I don't understand why this is the second book that I've read in 2 weeks where the Italian is not correct from people, at least in The Brutal Prince, which is the other book that I'm talking about. The character is American, third generation, so maybe the Italian has gotten bastardized as it's been passed down the line, like in The Sopranos. But in this book, this character is from Sicily. He moved to the United States 3 years ago. He would know how to speak Italian, I'm pretty sure. Hey babe, if you were telling me I am crazy, how would you say it?
Sei pazza.
Exactly. Guess how he says it to a woman. He says sei pazzo to a woman.
Sei pazzo. Sei pazza.
But he uses the O.
To a woman?
Yeah. Do you think a Sicilian talking to a woman would use the O on the end of pazza? No, exactly, right? If you're using Google Translate and you typed in you are crazy, it would probably say pazzo. But if you were a Sicilian talking to a woman, you wouldn't say pazza.
Yeah,
you would say pazza. Yes. I have it confirmed from a Sicilian's mouth that the grammar is incorrect. And this happens all the time. He keeps misgendering Millie, which is not, that's not, in Italian, everything is gendered, every single word, everything, like, the whole world is gendered. So they don't make mistakes with that kind of stuff. That's ingrained in them since they were children. A Sicilian would not forget that after 3 years in the States. My husband was in the States for 5 years and he didn't forget that, and he's Sicilian. So I have proof right here. So anyway, I feel like if we're gonna use Italian in books, this is my new rule. If we're gonna use other languages just in general in books, we should talk to somebody who speaks that language instead of just relying on Google Translate. Because it costs you probably $0 to find somebody who speaks that language on like Reddit or Instagram or something, and just get like a double check, like a sanity check, because Google Translate's not gonna cut it. And it's a small thing, but it takes you out of the story, and it's frustrating, and I stand by that. But I did like the end, and I liked the epilogue. I thought that was like a fun twist on it. Like that was the only twist that was there, and I liked it. I thought that was good, and it set up for several more books, which is interesting, and I liked it. So 4 stars overall, but kind of in between 3 and 4 with the whole Last Mrs. Parrish. Okay, I forgot, but we're running out the door, so I have to make this quick. There's also like a ton of plot holes between what happens with the Italian guy, Enzo, and Millie, the girl, the maid. And there's a ton of plot holes between what happens with Nina, the rich lady who employs her, and Millie. And none of them are ever resolved. In fact, they're made way worse by like the reveal at the end. And so there's just like a ton of plot holes in this book overall that I'm just like, or at least like, not necessarily plot holes, but like, why in the world would a character behave that way knowing what I know after the fact? Anyway, whole thing, that kind of minus the book some liking in my brain too, because when I look back on it, the reveal then didn't make everything come together and made it way worse. But anyway, that's all. Okay, gotta go. Bye. And then you know what? I'm gonna save the last book for next week's when I've read it, because it is again the first in a series, and I don't want to speak too soon or too prematurely when I don't know how the series is going to wrap up. So it's The Remnant Chronicles is the series I'm reading now, the first book being The Kiss of Deception. I really want to read Dance of Thieves, and my husband bought it for me for my birthday, but it's in the same world I know as The Remnant Chronicles, and I have this thing where I have to read like all of the background books first. Like I couldn't read Six of Crows without reading Shadow and Bone, even though you kind of have to like slog through Shadow and Bone because it's not nearly as good as Six of Crows. I'm positive the same thing is happening here, but I cannot stop myself. I must read The Remnant Chronicles before Dance of Thieves. So that's where we're at, and that's what I'm reading. But I'm going to save that for next time because I don't want to say stuff and have to like remember and backtrack later, because I'm only going to remember at the end. But yeah, those are the books that I've read this week. If you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you think I'm wrong. Let me know if you think I've made good points, or just have a general discussion with me. That's it. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. Please like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye.